I'm interested in is what on earth gave you the idea in the first place? What was your inspiration?
Well, starting at about age 13, I was very fascinated by the whole idea of you are what you think. Personal performance psychology, if you will. I was very much into sports, baseball in particular at that age. And I kept, as a young boy will do, fantasizing about what I'd be doing at the plate, hitting the baseball or fielding and this kind of thing. And I kept noticing that the kind of fantasies I was having, the kind of mental energy I was putting towards something started to show up in my performance. And I just thought everybody did that, you know, but come to find out later on, no, not really. And so I was fascinated by psychology in that rather limited sense. And then in the early 90s, I ran across a psychologist from Southern California. His name was Dr. Roger Callahan. And Roger was the first one to bring out the whole idea of borrowing from the acupuncture meridian system by tapping on meridians and integrating that into the therapy process. And I learned what he was doing, and the first thing I learned from him was how to use it for phobias, you know, the excess fear of things. And I, who had no psychological training at all, was getting results with people. And it was astonishing, you know. And so I would do workshops, and I would teach other people to do it, and so on. And from there, we began to expand and realize that this process didn't just deal with fears and phobias. It dealt with every single emotional issue you could have, because all of these negative emotional issues end up with a disruption in the body's energy meridians. So the same process would work for them. I don't care what label you give to the emotional issue itself, you know. So from there we expanded, and then we started noticing that as we were having these emotional issues subside, physical things would start to improve as well. Headaches would go away, back pains subside. I mean, chronic stuff that had been there for years oftentimes would go away in minutes or a session or something like that. And they would even often go away permanently. Not always, but sometimes permanently. And so that gave us the real entree into the whole idea that our unresolved emotional stuff shows up physically in serious diseases. And as we've expanded and done more with it and learned more, et cetera, we've expanded our process so that we've had people with very serious ailments are getting out of wheelchairs, for example. Tumors are subsiding, this kind of thing. I'm not saying 100% for everybody all across the board. It takes skill to use this and so on. But we're getting a lot of stuff done that nobody else can do. I haven't seen anybody else do anything, put it that way.
Are you concerned, though, that you are teaching people a technique that hasn't really been tried and tested?
Well, at this point it has been tried and tested. There are something like 50 or 60 different research studies that have been done on it in a variety of ways. It is being used by hundreds of people around the world in various ways. Therapists are using it all the time. And so it has been tried and tested, both from a research point of view as well as a
But
clinical
not as rigorously, say, as conventional medicine.
Say it again, please.
It hasn't been as rigorously tested as, say, conventional medicine, for example.
No, that hasn't happened. No. Each one of these studies to do a very rigorous study, a bulletproof study that has, you can't argue with it at all, very expensive. $2, $3, $4, $5 million per study.
Don't you think that would be a good idea before you started teaching people these techniques, that you test it properly?
Actually, I think it would be a poor idea. And the reason for that is who has $2, $3, $4, $5 million to do a study? We would do one study on the fear of heights, for example. And it would take years to do that study. And then that only says, oh, it'll work for the fear of heights, when we know very well it works for all these other things.
But this is what conventional medicine has to do. It costs millions and millions of dollars, for example, for a drug to go out to the market, and it takes between 10 and 20 years for it to be tested. I mean, if everybody used your criteria, there'd be all sorts of drugs and potions going on the market that perhaps weren't properly policed.
Well, and that's true, and maybe that's a weakness in our process. However, nobody's argued that point so far, and we've been doing this 20 years. We keep getting the results.